Hi again. Walter Rauschenbusch, Christianity and the Social Crisis, page 409, talking about the inevitable triumph of socialism if Christian principles are enacted. We started out with the proposition that the ideal of a fraternal organization of society will remain powerless if it is supported by idealists only, that it needs the firm support of a solid class whose economic future is staked on the success of that ideal, and that the industrial working class is consciously or unconsciously committed to the struggle for the realization of that principle. It follows that those who desire the victory of that ideal, from a religious point of view, will have to enter into a working alliance with this class, just as the Protestant principle of religious liberty and the democratic principle of political liberty rose to victory by an alliance with the middle class, which was then rising to power. So the new Christian principle of brotherly association must ally itself with the working class if both are to conquer. Each depends on the other. The idealistic movement alone would be a soul without a body. The economic class movement alone would be a body without a soul. It needs the high elation and faith that come through religion. Nothing else will call forth that self-sacrificing devotion and lifelong fidelity which will be needed in so gigantic a struggle as lies before the working class. The cooperation of professional men outside the working class would contribute scientific information and trained intelligence. They would mediate between the two classes, interpreting each to the other, and thereby lessening the strain of hostility. Their presence and sympathy would cheer the working people and diminish the sense of class isolation. By their contact with the possessing classes, they could help to persuade them of the inherent justice of the labor movement, and so create a leaning toward concessions. No other influence could do so much to prevent a revolutionary explosion of pent-up forces. It is to the interest of all sides that the readjustment of the social classes should come as a steady evolutionary process rather than as a social catastrophe, as it happened already once before in America, and of course in Europe in the years from 1800 to 1850. If the laboring class should attempt to seize political power suddenly, the attempt might be beaten back with terrible loss and inefficiency to the movement. If the attempt should be successful, a raw governing class would be compelled to handle a situation so vast and complicated that no past revolution presents a parallel. There would be widespread disorder and acute distress, and a reactionary relapse to old conditions would, by all historical precedents, be almost certain to occur. It is devoutly to be desired that the shifting of power should come through a continuous series of practicable demands on one side and concessions on the other. Such an historical process will be immensely facilitated if there are a large number of men in the professional and business class with whom religious and ethical motives overcome their selfish interests, so that they will throw their influence on the side of the class which is now claiming its full rights in the family circle of humanity. On the other hand, the Christian idealists must not make the mistake of trying to hold the working class down to the use of moral suasion only, or be repelled when they hear the brute note of selfishness and anger. The class struggle is bound to be transferred to the field of politics in our country in some form. It would be folly if the working class failed to use the leverage which their political power gives them. The business class has certainly never failed to use political means to further its interests. This is a war of conflicting interests, which is not likely to be fought out in love and tenderness. The possessing class will make concessions, not in brotherly love, but in fear, because it has to. The working class will force its demands, not merely because they are just, but because it feels it cannot do without them, and because it is strong enough to coerce. Even Bismarck acknowledged that the former indifference of the business class in Germany to the sufferings of the lower classes had not been overcome by philanthropy, but by fear of the growing discontent of the people and the spread of social democracy. Max Nordau meant the same when he said, "In spite of its theoretical absurdity, socialism has already, in 30 years, wrought greater amelioration than all the wisdom of statesmen and philosophers of thousands of years." End of quote. All that we as Christian men can do is to ease the struggle and hasten the victory of the right by giving faith and hope to those who are down, and quickening the sense of justice with those who are in power, so that they will not harden their hearts and hold Israel in bondage, but will let the people go. But that spiritual contribution, intangible and imponderable though it be, has a chemical power of immeasurable efficiency. Next time, summary of the argument. I put in a link to the Jubilee system. Rauschenbusch early in the book has noted the power of this idea, which for all we know was never enacted in Israel. That is the 7-year cycle, liberation cycle, and the 49-year Jubilee cycle, apparently never observed in the entire history of ancient Israel, despite its centrality to the message, the economic and political message, as well as religious message of the book of Leviticus and its centrality in the law, the Torah. So obviously Rauschenbusch is not thinking that this socialistic idealism can work without the potency of the Christian religion at its center and as its impetus. See you soon.